I've been asked by many how I make my goose jerky. This recipe yields an incredibly mild flavor without a hint of any liver-like taste that can come from waterfowl and goose. It is sweet and also a bit hot and spicy at the same time. The starting point of this recipe are skinless, boneless goose breasts, so I'll assume you already know how to do this, and from here we'll start my process. Okay, so these are skinless, boneless Canada goose breasts. As you can see, they're a couple inches thick. There's a few bullet holes in them, and what we'll want to do is trim all those away. First thing I do though is just give them a good rinse, make sure they're cleaned up, make sure there's no feathers on them, and kind of prepare them for the next step. The next step in the process is to take each of the goose breasts and remove the fat and the silver from each of the breasts. Here you can see I've got a piece of fat I'll cut off. Also like to remove the silver. The silver is that silver shiny looking skein that's on each of the breasts. That may have a little bit of an off flavor to it, so if there's a thick piece of it, I generally remove it. Also on the back side of the breast you can see here there's usually a large piece of fat which I'll take off. The goose fat doesn't hurt the flavor all that much. If we were making venison jerky, we would remove all the fat because it does give an off taste to the flavor. But with the goose, the fat is not so much a distasteful thing as much as it is aesthetic. The jerky looks more uniform if it doesn't have silver on it and if it doesn't have any fat on it either. So go ahead, take each breast, remove that. Next thing we do is we want to take each of the breasts and split them long ways. We do that because that way they'll fit in my jerky slicer a whole lot better. And the way I do it is I just cut it like it was a chicken breast, just to split each one in half. And the idea here is lengthwise to get two uniform pieces of breast. When I flip this over here, you'll see these are now ready to be put right into the jerky slicer, and the end product is very, very nice. The next step in the process here is to slice the breasts that we just cut in half and split in half. This particular slicer I bought from Academy Sports, which I believe is a sports outlet down in Texas. Cabela's also sells it. It's about $199 through Cabela's. I think I picked this up for $99 through Academy. Anyway, you feed the breasts in through the top, you crank the handle, down through the bottom come uniform pieces of jerky. The jerky slicer does a great job of getting a uniform size, as you can see. These strips are perfect for going on the smoker. They're about 1/4 inch in thickness. The key here is to make them all the same thickness so that when they go through the smoker they're all finished at about the same time. If you have varying degrees of thickness, they'll all finish up at different times and you'll have to sort through them as you cook them in the smoker. If you do this by hand, just make sure that you cut them all to be about the same thickness. As a general rule, I don't do product endorsements, but I do like this Sweet and Hot brand from Cabela's. It gives the meat a very good sweet and hot flavor. I will caution you that when you use this, it's very powdery and it's going to make you sneeze, so have a box of tissues next to you when you open these packets. Each box is good for 15 pounds of breast, which when it's smoked down is going to weigh much, much less. But inside are 3 packets of cure and 3 packets of spice. You'll need 1 packet of each for each 5 pounds of goose breast that you decide to make jerky with. But I do find this to be a very tasty brand. The next step in the process is to prepare the spice cure mix that goes with the meat. This is a packet for 5 pounds of goose breast. That's the spice, and this here is the cure that goes for 5 pounds of meat. The two get mixed together and then added with 1/2 cup of water. The two are mixed together. It's best to do this where you put the powder into a bowl and slowly add the water instead of dumping it in as we just did there. Mix this up. Again, this is enough for 5 pounds. I've got a total of 12 pounds in my tub, which you can see to the left. And you can see my scale is there to the right. The reason being is that because I've got an odd number of pounds, it doesn't equate to a 5-pound batch. We'll prorate the portions of the 5-pound packets to equate to a 2-pound, so that we can hit 12 pounds with the appropriate amount of spice and cure. So once it's mixed, it just goes on top of the meat, poured over evenly. This will be just one bowl of really 3 additions that we'll make to this batch, and then we'll move on to mixing it up. This is without a doubt my least favorite part of the process here, is mixing the meat with the cure and spice, just because it feels like you're mixing in a bunch of snakes, and it's weird to the touch. So if you can get over the look of it and the feel of it, which is very, very slimy, you'll do just fine. And once you're past this process, the hardest part is over. After adding the cure and the spice mix to the meat, I usually let that go refrigerated for approximately 24 hours. If possible, I mix it up a couple more times in between intermittently, just to evenly disperse it. You'll see a lot of that meat will start to change color from a reddish color to a dark, deep, dark, almost black color, which is pretty normal. But my suggestion is about 24 hours. After that's done, next you spread them out onto your rack as I'm doing here. Right now I've got the smoker warming up to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and once I get these all set on the rack, then I'm going to go and throw them in the smoker. The smoker's been warming up while I've been loading the trays, and here I'm putting just some apple wood chips that I've soaked in water into my smoker. You insert it, you turn it upside down, and it falls on top of the heating element. That's what begins the smoking process. It'll take just a little bit before it starts to smoke, but I leave the vent about halfway open. Here is my smoker. It's up to 200 degrees. I'm going to load it with the jerky, which I've already put onto the trays. It's set for 200 degrees. I'm going to let it go for 1 hour, and after 1 hour I'm going to come in and check it and start to rotate the trays. I take the trays at the bottom, move them to the top, the ones at the top, move them to the bottom. At this point, none of the jerky is done, but I'm roughly about halfway point, and that's a good time to make that switch. Now I'm at the 2-hour mark, and I'm going to pull out the trays and evaluate which pieces are done and which ones are not. This piece here, which is real dark, and you can see that it's changed color dramatically and looks different than the others. It's also very flexible. This piece is done, so I'm going to end up taking this and putting it aside and start to sort the pieces on the trays. The ones that are done will stay out. The ones like this, which are clearly not done, will be rearranged on different trays and consolidated and then put back in the smoker. And I'll probably add another 20 minutes to this tray. I should add that from the beginning to the end, it takes about 2.5 hours for the jerky to dry out in the smoker. Some pieces will be done at 2 hours. Others may take up to 2 hours and 45 minutes. But that's about the length of time it takes at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The final step in my process is to vacuum pack my jerky. I put it in these small bags that I purchased from Bass Pro or from Cabela's. I trim off the excess or the tops of these bags so there's not an excessive amount of overhang. You'll see here there's a little cutter inside of my vacuum packer that will cut off that trim piece. Then I add to that one small oxygen absorber. You can buy these online as well. They cost maybe a nickel a piece, and they do an excellent job of keeping oxygen outside of the package and keeping the material that's inside fresh. I still freeze these even with the oxygen absorber, but it makes a really nice little snack pack to take with you or to give away. Anyway, you connect it to the vacuum packer, you close the lid, you lock it, it sucks out all the air, and then it heat seals the end. That's pretty much all there is to it. This is how I make jerky. A small commercial here. There's not many waterfowlers left in the world, so do what you can to bring newcomers into the sport. It'd be a tradition that hopefully we can preserve for many years into the future. Thanks much. Have a wonderful day.